All right. Good morning, everybody. We are back at it Tuesday, which means it is time for another podcast recording. It will be the usual format, though we have a bit to talk about. This is another week where there's enough going on that I'm not sure that this will always be a thing with the show, but I will say that I think that there are some weeks where there is enough going on that we just need to respond to and talk about some of the things that we've got going on in the world around us and so on and so forth. And with the with being distracted for the last several weeks with the big event that happened locally around me and everything going on, I never really took time to talk about the individual things, and so here we are. We're going to go ahead and talk about them, but under the idea that um, under a very specific idea, under a very specific direction, because I don't think it's good to talk about the realities of the situation, but I want to talk about it through with something very specific in mind. So as is usually the case, the way this is going to work is in a minute here, I'm going to go ahead and hit record. Once I hit record, um, the um, the episode recording will start, and that's when I will stop taking questions from the comment section until after everything is done, and then I'll go through and I'll hit the comment section. That being said, stay tuned to the end. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them along the way. And then towards the end of the show, like I said, I'll go ahead and address them and all of that. All right, let's go ahead and get set up here. We are live in the group. Fantastic. All right, let's rock and roll. All right. Got my notes. Yes, I have notes. All right. All right. Cool. Let's do it. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Buddy Walk with Jesus. As always, as we get started, we want you all to know two very important things: that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. If you are, hold up, am I recording to the right device? Recording device. I am not. All right, let's go ahead and run that back. Rescan for audio devices, which means can you guys hear me through the right audio device? One second, please. All right, come on. I apologize for the fact that my audio quality probably sounded like a tin can. All right, let's make sure. Okay, cool. That does appear as though the audio is still working. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, let's try that again. All right, let's make sure recording device. Nope. Oh, please. There we go. All right, now take two. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Buddy Walk with Jesus. As always, as we get started, I want you all to know two very important things: that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. If you are in need of prayer, do not hesitate to reach out, buddywalkpod@gmail.com. You can also join our Facebook group, the Buddy Walk Community, where we are going live, praying together, the whole 9 yards. So this has been a chaotic couple of weeks for a lot of reasons. There's been a lot going on the world's stage, and not just in the political sense. Yeah, that's part of it, but there's a lot going on in the news cycle, in the Christian world as well. And I've seen an interesting amount of takes on all of it. And I wanted to step in and just say a couple of things about it, but pointing in a very, very specific direction. So I'm going to go through a couple of points about some of the things that are going on. I'm only going to be able to touch on very specific things, but I'm going to try very hard to be as sensitive as possible to anybody who may be triggered by some of the things that are talked about within these different subjects. I'm not going to go into great detail, so it's not like it's going to get graphic or anything, but there are sensitive topics inside a lot of these, and so I just wanted to throw that out there for anybody. So the biggest one outside of like I said, political stuff, but within the Christian world, the biggest story that's hit recently is the whole Michael Tate thing. If you honestly don't know what I'm talking about, and some of you might not, being from a variety of different countries, Michael Tate, former member of DC Talk, became the lead singer of the Newsboys after Peter Weller left the band. And the band shifted from being a bunch of guys that were in a band, usually the way that a band is set up, to being Newsboys Inc. It became the manager's band, and essentially each one of the band members are basically being paid salary, and everything is run through Newsboys Inc. And it comes out that for a very long time, Michael Tate has been essaying women and men and drug abuse and different things like that. And one thing that I've been struck by the whole thing are the responses. Way back when the whole Ravi Zacharias thing happened, we did an episode. This is back when Edgar was still a part of the show, and Buddy Walk looked a lot different than it does now. It was before I had a blue beard. This whole scandal came out, and I remember watching him process that in front of the mic. And that was the moment where I realized just how big of a deal it is that I don't tend to like really look up and like idolize celebrities in any kind of substantive way. The one area that I can say that starts to get a little shaky is there are some academics that posited some work that if I were to ever find out that they had this big, moral failing, I'm not sure it would be enough to like rock my faith, because at this point I'm pretty keenly aware of the fact that humans are humans. But it would be very disheartening. It would be very disappointing, you know. So it's not lost on me, the idea that there are some folks within music or within church or within academia or whatever that for one reason, in one way or another or whatever, even from afar, play a hand in shaping some of the finer points of our faith. It doesn't hurt my disconnection from being impacted by the moral failing of a music star to say that I'm not that big of a fan of DC Talk. I think DC Talk's music was always very self-centered. I think it came at a time where it was very people focused and less about God, more about what man gets from God rather than God, personally. And Newsboys, um, so fun facts, Newsboys was my first Christian concert. I was at a youth conference once upon a time when my neighbor got me to join a youth group for a hot minute, and there was a traveling convention that I went to. Some of you might know it, Acquire the Fire. Um, but the first year that I went to Acquire the Fire, Newsboys was playing there. And so like that's kind of one of those things that I'll throw out from time to time. Like, yeah, I saw Newsboys back when Peter Furler was the lead singer, not knowing who they were or anything else like that. Though I did appreciate their CD Shine. They but I was never like super into their music. And then like post God's Not Dead, no, lost me entirely. I can't stand that movie. I can't stand that. We've talked about that. If you paid attention to any of the stuff that I've talked about Christian media and all of that sort of stuff, I can't stand that song or those movies. But all of that being said, there's a level of disconnection that I have to any of the bands that he was involved with. But there are a lot of people from the music industry that came out and were like, yeah, this is a scandal that surprised exactly nobody. And one of the things that did dishearten me is the prevailing consistency that's coming out among the various topics and things like that well, the different outlets or the different people or different things like that is that people couldn't come forward because nobody wanted to be the one to to go up against the golden goose. You know what I mean? Like Newsboys were at the top of the heap. They were arguably the biggest name in Christian music, and people did try to come forward, and they were silenced by Christian record labels and executives and things like that. It took somebody from, I believe, I listened to the interview on the Royce Report, and I believe she's from Australia or New Zealand. I don't remember which right off the top of my head, but somebody who isn't really even like a journalist. She had some ties to the music industry and had ended up connecting with one of the victims and went through and ended up being able to collect evidence and do investigative journalism and break the story, but she had literally nothing to lose from within the music industry. And so she so it took somebody disconnected from the system to do it. And I'm I'm a musician, and so I'm very well aware of the music industry. It is incredibly cutthroat. It is incredibly conniving in certain ways, because as a musician, if you are talented and if you are record worthy, you are some executive's meal ticket. And that is how you are viewed. And different music executives are not going to want to lose their meal ticket. And I think it just bums me out that in the Christian music world, it seems to be no different. And I say seems to be because it's not like I've all of my music stuff has all been within secular music and not Christian music. Not at least not at any kind of substantive level. So listening to what some of the folks like are saying and some of the responses and things like that have been from they've been either apathetic or they've been positioned in a way that is trying to like say something about how like you know oh I knew all along, but I just didn't want to come forward. And I don't know what to do with that. You know what I mean? Like, and then you get the people who are like, I tried to tell you. Did you really like scream from the rooftops that Michael Tate was an abuser? Like, is that what you did? You know what I mean? Or did you make some vague comment about how there's issues in Christian music? You know what I mean? But like, it's a rock and a hard place, because this is the stuff that like you don't know. Like, if that's your livelihood, it's a rock and a hard place. And I can try to have a measure of grace towards the situation and things like that. I will fundamentally say, though, that this is part of the reason why I don't appreciate the idea of Christian celebrities. I don't appreciate this idea of Christians with mass followings and people like looking up to them as if they are more. And I'll even make that one personal. There is a group on Facebook now, mind you, theologically. I had said the whole thing about a couple of writers and academics that were very influential on me, and they would be the closest thing to like a Christian celebrity. One of them is Dallas Willard. I have not been quiet about the fact that Dallas Willard has written a lot that has put a lot of lyrics to some of the ways that I conceive of the kingdom and our relationship with God and so on and so forth. Spiritual discipline and discipleship and a lot of things. There is a group on Facebook called Dallas Willard is my homeboy. And some of it's good. Some of it's, what would Dallas Willard say about this? Some of it's like straight idol worship of Dallas Willard. And that's where the group loses me. That's where it becomes oh, okay. What are we doing? Like, what's the point? What's the point of this? Don't get me wrong. Again, a lot of appreciation and a prolific writer, absolutely a prolific academic in a lot of regards. But what are we doing? You know what I mean? And the truth is, I'm not looking to make this yet another platform that is using this as a launching pad to talk about my own thing, because that's disrespectful to the victims. That's disrespectful to the people that have been affected by his decisions and things like that. Yeah, it just that there's, I'm sure, a level of folks that were involved with it where they didn't they didn't know what to do, and so they just stepped away from it. But the fact that the system prioritizes money and fame and a living over the well-being of people will always be slightly frustrating to me, and more than slightly, it's very humanistic, and I can understand that better than a lot of Christians. I think, at least a lot of Christians that I talk to, that I don't hold any profound expectation on humanity, and that might sound a little nihilistic, and maybe it is, but there are some times where this gets to a point where you're like, yo, you were a big name fox in the henhouse. You were a person that people looked up to, and I'm not one of those people that I sit in a weird in between, because I think sometimes we expect a lot out of Christian musicians when it comes to being like spiritual gurus and stuff like that. And I'm not that far. I don't think that like, just because you play Christian music, you need to be like pastor level, masters of divinity, whatever. But there's a difference between secular and Christian music. We can go 12 rounds with a ref about the quality of Christian music. We can go 12 rounds with a ref about whether or not Christian music is actually God honoring or anything else like that. And we can go 12 rounds with a ref about whether or not you intend on people looking up to you as somebody who is singing these anthems of faith and relationship with God, even if they're not specifically like praise music in the purest sense. But the reality is, people do. Right, wrong, and indifferent, people do. And I just fundamentally believe that there's a heightened level of responsibility on Christian musicians. And so it just, I'll say it like this. I hope, for the sake of his soul and the sake of him being an image bearer, that this whole thing is a catalyst for him to get very deep help and step completely out of the limelight. Like, be done with it. Fame and adoration and money are all very addictive. And so, who knows what he does next. But I recognize that this can be it can be very hard when we look around and we see some of our own doing this. And I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of the case. The Royce Report did a phenomenal job at that. There's interviews with the person who broke the story. There's the story itself. There's tons of information out there. This is more of the speed of a pastor responding to what I'm seeing and some of the aftermath of that. And that whole mess. Now, there is another flavor of this that's a bit more, or another story that's a bit more, unfortunately, relatable for many of us in the church world. In the midst of the Michael Tate thing, another story came across the Royce report that kind of flew under the radar and was was overshadowed by the Michael Tate thing becoming like the dominant news piece. And it was broken that a longtime youth pastor, family relationship author, all of these things, got busted grooming and, again, essaying a very specific person at their church. Now, this one hits home because at one point in time, I attended that church. At one point in time, my wife attended that church. And so this is frustrating. Like, this is where if I allowed myself, you would hear, I get the, I'm going to say the word privilege, and I don't know. I know I'm recording this. I know this is going out to a lot of people and all of that. So don't hold it against me if the word privilege is not the right word here. But I have the ability to be able to be at least some level of disconnected and just simply sit at the level of mourning for people who are mourning for the Michael Tate thing. I knew this guy. I wasn't a fan of this guy back in the day. Namely because he made some insinuations about me back in the day that were annoying on the front end, stupid and unfounded on every single level. He just didn't like me. And all of that. Nothing that was like, newsworthy or anything, or any kind of significant drama or anything else like that. Just one of the many reasons why I had ended up leaving that church. But then to turn around and see what he was doing, is infuriating. Yeah, I've never been a particularly big fan of his, and this is and yeah. So, but I'm also not going to sit here and sit in one of the camps like the I talked about in the last conversation about how I tried to tell you he wasn't a good dude. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've said many a time that dude is a jerk. But it's not like I had on my bingo card that he was grooming some woman from the church. And again, this is a guy that got funded by an organization to write books, to have celebrity, to have fame, to have all of these things, and to be prominent in a particular part of Christian thought, but was backed by an organization to do it. Like, there are some people that just like, okay, they are big thinkers, they are eloquent speakers, they are this, they are that. And again, this is why I keep going back to the whole idea of the academic world being like this one spot where I'm like, okay, it just feels like the people who got on top of the mountain here did so because they posited something that was actually worthwhile, that was actually like substantive. They just didn't sing good or say something like that was formulaic enough. And that's part of the thing that frustrates me the most about this whole thing is he got the wagons hooked to him because he helped lead a megachurch to scale and grow and all of that. And again, I don't care. You go to a mega church, awesome. I don't care. That's so not my point. I have long since made peace with the idea of mega churches. It's that it's just formula. It's just carbon copy. It's literally an equation on a board. Like Christian music, it is literally an equation on a board. And you find people, you find situations, you find circumstances that fit into you do this and you do this and you do this, and hey, look at that. Church is growing. And my question will always become at a church level, um, are you actually caring for your people? I don't care how many people you're talking about. I don't care about how big the room is. What are you doing with those people? Are those people cared for? Are those people, is there any kind of substance for them to be able to engage in a way that helps them make disciples who can make disciples? Because that's not just the responsibility of the dude at the front of the room. That's everybody's responsibility. But if you're not teaching that, then what you are not equipping people to do the thing that we should be doing. And that's the unfortunate reality of what was happening. That's the unfortunate idea of what was happening at that church. I don't know what the church is about. So anybody who, I know that there are some of you that are local, that are listening to this. I'm not trying to take a shot. I don't know what I haven't known what they looked like for the last long time. You know what I mean? It's been a very long time since I've known a thing about that church. So I'm not throwing shade at any modern incarnation, because the reality is he spun off a long while ago and was doing this whole thing, was doing his whole thing. And you know, it's frustrating when the one area, like church, like to me, and maybe this is wrong, right? Maybe this is incorrect, and this is me, and in some ways live processing, because I have not had a chance with everything going on with the event we talked about that, and with wrapping up a preaching assignment, and wrapping up a session that I'm teaching, and a whole lot of things. It's all kind of been hurried up to a very specific point, and now that very specific point, we wrap up class this tonight at time of this recording, and so everything is just kind of like poof, the lights have been turned down on everything that's been going on, and so now I'm sitting here processing it. And unfortunately, there's a difference between what I believe what actually happens. For a lot of people, the only safe place that they find is in their music. The only safe place that they find is through a television screen or through a device, listening to somebody posit thought, listening to somebody put forward ideas and things like that. And that's the only connection that they have to the church or to greater Christianity, because they've been hurt, or because they don't trust, or because something has happened, because they don't have a safe place around them. All of these different reasons. And unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I wish everybody had a safe place around them. Not that I don't value the online ministry and all of that, but I wish more people didn't have to do it out of a matter of necessity, and that it was just simply choice. And so I get all of the individual pieces, but I still even if I would say this, even if we were talking about a digital church, that I believe that there is a difference between somebody experiencing this through the lens of Christian media and somebody experiencing this through the lens of church. As Christians, church should be a safe place. As Christians, church should be community. And hopefully, all of that is also welcoming to non-Christians and all of that sort of stuff. We can get into a church culture conversation towards folks that are on, that are coming in from the outside, unsaved, all those things. We can get into all that. But as Christians, church should be safe. I don't know about the rest of where everybody is as far as from a cultural standpoint, but here at least I hear a lot because a lot of this area is post-Catholic. I don't want anything to do with the church until they do something about the priests messing with little boys. Horrifying, horrible that all of that happens. It's not just happening in Catholicism. And it's not just happening to little boys. And so there's the reality that for a lot of people, they have only ever seen that church is an unsafe place. And then you couple in the fact that for the people that happens to, that for them, church as a whole has only ever been like their life. Like growing up, I've talked to a lot of people growing up. Oh, we went to church on Sunday and on Wednesday, and I hung out with my church friends and all of that sort of stuff. I think the most honest take that I heard from somebody recently was, growing up, church was life, but it didn't really prepare you for life outside of church. I thought that was a very like post teenage years and all of that. I thought that was a very refreshing take on the idea, because this is also somebody who serves on a leadership council for a church and so on and so forth. Like, it's not like there was like this big falling away moment, but I just I thought that was a good way of processing all of that. And it's unfortunate when it feels like, as a Christian, you have to make excuses for some of the grimy nonsense that happens from within the four walls. When you have somebody who is at the front of the room that has all of this power, that's recognized in this prominent role for being the significant figure within family ministry, within youth ministry, all of those things, it and that's the reason why they are lauded. That's the reason why they are heralded. That's the reason why they utilize their spiritual authority and power dynamics to coerce something happening. There's no wonder why there are plenty of people that have deconstructed away from the faith entirely because they see hypocrites. And that's the thing, right? Like, when we talk about how do we make sense of the chaos in the world, how do we make sense of all of the things that are happening that center around Christianity and center around people of God and center around abuse and center around bad takes and center around all of these things? How do we process that in a way that, and like, how do we even know what truth is? If we see people in power who are abusing people, who are using that power to nefarious ends. And then for any of us that have been in a situation where we feel like we could have done something, even anything. Like, yeah, there are some times where I'm like, yeah, this dude set my spidey senses off. And this dude was a jerk. And this dude's generally perpetuators of a thing are the first people to try and make insinuations about other people, to try and get the blame off of them, to get the spotlight off of them. There are points where I'm like, dude, what would have happened if I shouted from the rooftops? If I was undeniable? Probably nothing. Probably not a single solitary thing. But I will not forget. It is etched into my brain. When I heard about this, and I approached my wife and I pulled it up and I was like, hey, you got to read this. And as a husband, as a pastor, as a Christian, it was infuriating. And those are the moments where I need to check my heart, because there's a quote that I recently saw from Pope Francis that caught my attention. Being ill-tempered is not a sign of holiness. And I think that's something that we need to remember. For those of us that feel like we are sitting on the correct side of Christian thought in some way, shape, or form, we need to remember that fighting fire with fire doesn't help anything. Feeling like you have the moral high ground doesn't help anything. You might, but using that as a platform for anger and aggression and righteous indignation doesn't do anybody any good, and it's damaging to your own soul. And the thing that used to bug me about this idea of forgiveness and turning the other cheek and all of that sort of stuff is, I would say things like, so I'm just supposed to forget about this? You're supposed to get off the hook? The person who perpetuated these atrociously evil things, they just get off the hook? And through time with the Holy Spirit, I've realized that it's not that forgiveness has you forget about what has happened. It's that it doesn't consume you. And that matters. That matters, that it doesn't consume you. That the darkness doesn't consume you. That the darkness doesn't become the final note of what has shaped how you conceive of people or the world around you or situations or circumstances or anything like that. And that's where, like, and so and I'll finish out the hat trick, though part of that was already taken care of when we talked about this. Was it last week or the week before? Then you have turning on the news and you have the flooding in Texas, and you have some people that are saying, like, because traditionally, Texas is a very evangelical or conservative or red state. Um, People celebrating, you know, almost like as if it's karma, you know, God judging this particular group of people. And then you have the political landscape with the bill that was passed and what that honestly does to families and to older folks and to individuals who are on low income. um it is a really big hit to low income individuals, and it's all enough to get you to a place where if you are prone to throwing your hands up and saying, I'm done messing with you, that it's disheartening. It's disheartening to see people celebrating the loss of life. It is disheartening to see the poor and disenfranchised get screwed. It is unfortunate that yet another story of scandal and abuse and all of that sort of stuff has come out, and it further, it further highlights the reality that even though there is, you know, the uncomfortable truth is that among, I'm going to say among Christian men, I'm sure some statistic someplace says that it's not just Christian men, but I'm going to speak from the male perspective. Um, it's not uncommon to hear, oh, a Christian man is struggling with some form of sexual addiction, some form of sexual deviance. And we've created a culture where that gets to sit under the radar because of how we conceive about it, because we struggle with having intelligent conversations about it, thoughtful conversations about it. And we've developed a cover up culture where in Christian culture, in American Christian culture, it is so wildly easy for cover up culture to be able to allow for these acts of abuse to be able to perpetuate and keep going. There is a frustrating reality to that. There is a frustrating truth to that. And the the level of needing to, for your own soul, as well as in communicating to other people, double down on the difference between people and God is tiring sometimes. Um, and so I look at this whole dynamic, and I I want to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, there are some people that because of this is just another, um did I Am I back? Okay. That was odd. All right. Let's try that again. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know if you guys could see me that entire time, but the stream died out on me. All right. It the reality is that I acknowledge that there are some folks that will hear all of this and look at this and say something to the effect of, "Yep, this is why. Yep, this is why I don't trust Christianity. This is why I don't trust the church. This is why I'm not going to go back to church." And on some level, I don't blame you. On some level, I'm not going to sit here and be the person who tries to play pretend and say that that church is as safe as it should be, because it really honestly is not. And I hate that. I hate how true that is. Um and the the reality is we have to be willing to talk about it, but talk about it in a way that we don't lose God in the midst of it. That doesn't This is not me saying, "Oh, you need to go back to church. You need to go back to church." No, but a Christian without community is by themselves, and that's dangerous. A Christian without community is in a dangerous place. And I hate that so many Christians have been taught and shown that community can be dangerous. And so, what do we make with all of this, right? Like, what do we make of all of these things? And the one thing that I can say to folks is that we have to make sure that we don't get eaten alive by the darkness. And it's easy to get eaten alive by the darkness. It's easy to open up the news, open up the the newspaper, the your phone, social media, whatever, and see 17 reasons in the first 30 seconds to not to just give in to the darkness. But there are three words, and this is going to sound like I set all of this up and then I'm turning to a canned Christian response to all of it. But hear me out. Jesus is alive. I had the ability to, in my last preaching, in my last sermon for the preaching gig that I was doing over the last several weeks, I did a communion service, and that was the whole thing. Was Jesus is alive, and it helped me to be able to wrap my mind around the idea that in the midst of everything, in the midst of the highs and the lows, in the midst of the good and the bad, in the midst of every single solitary thing that we are going to experience, that there is a deep and unshakable truth that God is with us. Yes, people who claim the name of Christ do horrible and outrageous things, but God is with us. those aren't God. Those are people. And the truth is, sometimes people suck. A lot. And sometimes systems suck. A lot. But we can't lose sight of the hope that we have in Jesus. And the fact that we aren't called to happiness. We aren't called to ignore pain. We're not called to ignore tragedy or situations or circumstances. We are called to, invited into a living and dynamic hope and relationship with God that surpasses understanding, that surpasses anything that we can wrap our mind around. That God is with us, not just after the fire, but in the midst of it. For anybody who has heard any of these stories or experienced something like them, for anybody who has who was affected by these stories, I should say, or anybody who has expected or experienced something similar, and it's led them to this road of deconstruction, I don't blame you. I think everybody should go through a deconstruction period. But doing so authentically creates an environment where you can ask yourself the question, what do I believe and why do I believe it? Because a lot of times we just pull things forward because it's what we were always taught. And unfortunately, what we were always taught isn't correct or isn't safe. And the truth is, our hope is framed in the resurrection of Jesus. It isn't an abstract hope. It transforms and gives us power, and it's alive. Because Jesus conquered the grave, rose again, and is alive today. And sometimes the heart of the gospel is exactly what we need. Sometimes Christianity 101 is exactly what we need. When we come to Christ, it's not hyperbolic. We talk about resurrection power a lot. We proclaim the victory of Christ, the security of salvation, the promise of eternity. But life happens. Fear creeps in, and life feels uncertain, and tragedy strikes. What do we default to? And I'm not asking that out of shame. I'm not trying to say, oh, in the midst of all of this hard stuff, you need to be thinking about God. It's more that you get to turn to God rather than yet another unstable thing, yet another unstable situation that could be prone to hurting you again. And sometimes in the midst of trying to figure all this out and stay safe, sometimes the reality is you got to take a break from church. I don't blame you. This is not a call to the institution. This is a call to body of believers. This is a call to a relationship with Christ. Now, the hope is that that's not where you stand, where you stay. That it's not just a matter of, oh, I'm never doing this again. Because isolated and alone is a dangerous place to be. But what's more important than whether or not you go back to church or whether or not all of that sort of stuff is the whole idea of turning to Christ in the midst of the chaos that is the world around us. That's why I say, I'm talking about all of these things, but with a very specific idea in mind. That what sits above any of this is the hope of Christ. And sometimes, that's all I can cling to. That's the only thing that I know how to cling to for dear life and not let go. I'm not immune to this. Sometimes I look at the world around me and I'm like, this sucks. This really blows. And as I sat in front of that congregation, I was like, okay, we're doing communion. I know some of the stories and situations and circumstances. Let's go straight down the middle. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm talking about some of these situations because we have to be able to process them. That these things happened and that all of this really sucks. That all of this is hard. And I'm not trying to devalue that by saying, yeah, but Jesus. What I'm trying to say is, in the midst of all of the heartache that is going on, all of the uncertainty, all of the fear, all of the ambiguity, all of the chaos, all of it, in the midst of all of it, yeah, but Jesus. And like I said, I hate that I have to say some of this stuff in regards to, yeah, I understand that some Christians have acted fool. Yeah, I understand that some people are abusive and predatory, that spiritual abuse is so prevalent. But the one thing I take solace in is that's not the end of the story. The one thing I take solace in is the fact that that's not the final note. That's not the final chapter. That we can turn to something greater than ourselves. And my hope for everyone is that in the midst of the chaos, that we're able to remember the heart of the gospel, that God is for us, that God is with us, that there is a joy that starts now, not because circumstances are easy and not because things are okay, but because God is near. It's a joy that isn't tied to the fleeting feeling that we often associate with happiness. It's not shallow and it's not superficial. It's deep, it's anchored, and it's hopeful that we can live right alongside the very real situations and circumstances that life can bring with it because of Christ. It's the joy of knowing that the Spirit that dwells inside of you and the faithfulness of God can transcend situation and circumstance, present pain, and reality. It's the kind of joy that holds fast when everything else is shaking because it's rooted in something unshakable. God's promises are unshakable. And as we go through these trials, as we go through life, when we turn back to God, when we trust God, when we endure with God, and we are in the midst of it with God, our faith, our trust in God, in His character, in His promises is refined. And that is a beautiful thing because, church, faith refined is precious because faith refined becomes a testimony. And in the meantime, we have moments that can help us reaffirm our strength, even if they do seem intermittent at best. So, the moment that we say yes to Jesus and we truly surrender, it's not just a turning point, it's the first line of the story. It's page one, it's line one, my come to Jesus moment. It's where everything changes. Not because life suddenly gets easy, but because we're no longer walking through it alone. From that point forward, it's a journey. We follow Jesus not just in belief, but in action. We learn to love God with everything that we've got, heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love others in ways that stretch us. And let's be honest, experiencing life isn't always good. Sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes it's brutal. But through every high and low, through every joy and ache, we cling to the promise that God is with us, not just in theory, but in truth. And the thing that I can tell you, because I've lived it, because I believe it with everything in me, is that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. It's not just a tagline. It's not just a nice thought. That's the heartbeat of the gospel. God sees you. He's with you. And he's working, even when it feels like nothing makes sense. So, when we look at the world around us, we might not see Jesus in the flesh, but we see his fingerprints everywhere, in grace, in people, in second chances, in redemption, in peace that makes no sense, and in that quiet, steady voice that reminds us that you are mine, I've got you. So, sometimes it comes down to the fundamentals of the Christian faith. Nothing fancy, straight down the middle. Just raw truth that shouts the reality and substance of our hope from the rooftops. So, let's press forward. Let's do so with 3 words echoing from the depths of our soul, not because we have suddenly given up on this idea that, life is real. We're not trying to placate. We're not trying to cover it up or anything else like that. Nope. It sits in the midst of it that Jesus is alive. Let's pray. Father God, today we take time to weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, and sit in the reality of the world that we live in. But within that context, within that reality, is the fact that you are present. So, Father, I ask for a supernatural peace and awareness to you, that we may know that you are present with us, that we may know that you are here, that you are with us. Give us the strength and the courage to be able to walk forward as if your promises are true. Father, I thank you. I love you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, y'all. That's it. That's all. That's a wrap. Thank you all for joining. At this point, I would make some kind of vague promise about what next week's episode is going to be like, but I don't actually know at this point exactly what's going on as far as the subject matter. But tune in to find out. Again, if you need prayer, buddywalkpod at gmail.com. Remember, you are prayed for. You are loved deeply. All right. Peace. All right. And the recording is over. For all of you that are tuning in this morning, I'll drop a little bit of news for you all. I am bringing back Pastor Reacts. During the recording, I had mentioned that I've been teaching a course. So that course has been Tuesday nights. And so today wraps up the end of the end of that class. And so after that is done, Pastor Reacts is coming back. So be on the lookout for that. Y'all, I love you. I'm glad that you were with us this morning. If you need anything, buddywalkpod at gmail.com. If you need to talk about any of the nonsense that's going on in the world, buddywalkpod at gmail.com. Just know that God is with you. You are prayed for. You are loved deeply.